I'm very excited. Go ahead and introduce yourself, Mindy.
For sure. So I'm Mindy Hoffman. I am a therapist and an eating disorder recovery advocate, and a lot of people know me from at Living in the Hot Pink.
Thank you so much for that introduction. So to start off, I always like to ask the question, and this is the question that we're going to focus on today, is what is the thing that helped you the most in your recovery, or the thing that stands out? Might have been like a moment or a concept, but something when looking back on your recovery, it's something you pull away as one of your keys to recovering.
Yeah, I think that after being in treatment several times and going to therapy and having a dietitian, no one ever told me anything different, but I kept trying to recover. And so it was having to do something differently. And I kind of have a twofold for that. The first one was trusting my dietitian. So I kept having behaviors, I kept doing what I'd always done, but maybe getting a little bit farther and following the meal plan. And finally, I was just so frustrated that I couldn't recover. Like I couldn't do it. I just couldn't do it. And so I walked into my dietitian's office. I had this little note card and I said to her, I'm going to give you 6 months. I'll give you 6 months and I'll do everything you want to a T. And I did that. And because I did that, I was then able to do really good work in therapy just around like kind of the demons of my past. And those two things combined are what really let me really get into a good space of recovery.
Mm-hmm. There's so much that came out of that you just said that I want to follow up on. And it sounds like you had this moment where you were doing things differently, but also doing something that you were like resisting. And then you said it helped you in other areas. So can you tell me a little bit about how like doing those things, those goals helped you in other areas of your recovery?
Yeah, I think the biggest one was probably I didn't trust people very well. And so just the small thing of trusting my dietitian, so some of my goals were like not weighing myself for a month, doing my meal plan to a T for a month, and trusting that if I did that, I would really be in a better space and feel better. And so the more I trusted that gave me courage in therapy to trust my therapist and start talking about things I never talked about before. And
Mm-hmm.
so that was a way of doing it differently as well.
Mm-hmm. And from the doing it differently, what would you tell others about what you maybe wish you would have done sooner, or what kind of advice would you give about doing it differently? Because that's a great concept. I love that. And also that's really hard, right? I mean, you resisted it for so long.
Yeah, so I definitely regret not doing that my first time in treatment, which was like almost 20 years ago. And so I really regret like just all the time I lost and relationships that I lost and health and things like that. I've come to learn that the emotion behind resistance is fear. So I think just having that, I don't know, just to take that leap and trust that like everyone around me really knows what they're talking about. Like they're not just giving me these things to do because they have nothing else to do. Like they're trained in what they're doing. They know what they're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
So I think the advice I would give is like really lean in. And if everyone around you is saying the same thing, if your friends and your family are like, you need help, you need to see a therapist, there's a reason everyone's telling you that,
Mm-hmm.
especially if the messaging is consistent.
Yeah, I think that's great. I think this is a great concept to kind of hit on as a side note of, trusting your treatment team and leaning in, because we haven't talked about this. Like no one has brought that up yet. And I get questions about, how do I do recovery? How do I, make progress in recovery when, I don't see it, but everyone else sees it. So, just that encouragement from you to, looking back on your recovery to lean in and get uncomfortable and still, I think that's, like you were talking about, you have to have a lot of compassion for yourself, because there are so many things that led up to that point when you decided to do it differently that were part of your recovery and necessary parts of like learning about your recovery and learning about yourself and learning about all these things that aided in allowing you to do it differently, right? um, so again, I wrote a few questions down here and I want to kind of see here. Okay, so if someone, how did you probably had to do this, like just going in and jumping into like totally feeling uncomfortable with that list. That was probably really scary. Um, how did you navigate that? What helped you just, make those changes and those big changes and finally lead into those things? What helped you through that? Because that's very uncomfortable.
Yeah, super uncomfortable. I think there are a few things. I was just tired of my eating disorder. And again, I keep saying I wasn't doing anything different, but that really is like it just clicked for me. And I was just tired. I was exhausted. I knew I could die from my eating disorder and I didn't want to die. I was missing out on so much life. I was so tired of every time like my friends asked me how I was doing, all I talked about was like food and calories and exercise. And that is not who I am. And I knew that internally. So there was this constant like struggle of like who I really am and who the eating disorder was like defining me.
Yeah.
The other thing, I had a friend, we both had a mutual friend who had an eating disorder. And my friend said to me, "Hey, our friend committed to her meal plan for as long as it took for her to be in recovery, and it was a whole year."
Mm-hmm.
And for me, I was like, man, it's not a quick fix.
Yeah.
And I think I'm ready.
Mm-hmm.
Tired of this.
Yeah. Yeah, there's so many things that, again, that you said, but feeling like getting to this place where you feel like, okay, I'm tired of this. I want it to look different. So like, motivation being a huge factor in this. But also, okay, so a few things you said with doing these things, why is that necessary to the healing? Because I think many people think, okay, how's the quick fix, or how can I still, avoid this scary thing that I'm, avoiding and still recover. I want to recover, but I don't want these other things that are too scary. How did having to face those things and do those things, why was that essential to your healing? Does that question make sense?
I think so. I'll take a stab at it.
Yeah.
So I firmly believe that eating disorders are like a holistic disease. They impact every part of our body, our soul, spirituality, mind, emotions. And I knew to be balanced and to be whole, I had to work on all those parts. And so I think that just really digging into each of those pieces and trying to integrate them all was really helpful.
Mm-hmm.
And I just lost my train of thought.
Yeah, so you're saying like it's just holistic, and so you had to address every single part.
Oh, right. So in order to heal, so for example, in order to do the therapy, I had to be stable with nutrition and movement.
Mm-hmm.
So I couldn't do the work I needed to do emotionally until I was okay physically.
Mm-hmm.
And then for me, I couldn't really work on my spirituality until I started dealing with the things that happened to me in my life. And so it all just kind of impacted each other. And
Yeah.
then the healthier I got spiritually and emotionally, that impacted how I took care of my body even more.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's how I think about it.
Yeah. That's a great point. I totally agree. It's so complicated. There's so many things that go into recovery, and there's so many moving pieces, and addressing all of them are super important. Like, and that's kind of the idea that I was getting to. You can't, maybe say I'll work on, I'll do these things, but I'm not going to do that thing. And it might look like that at some points, and that's still progressing forward, right? You're working on some things while you're building motivation for something else, but it has to be, all encompassing for sure. So thank you. I think that would be a very helpful point for people to hear as well. And you said you talked about like the eating disorder, and I forgot, I didn't jot down the rest of the question, but like you mentioned the eating disorder defining you. How, kind of speaking to that, how How has that changed in your recovery?
Yeah, I think that it caused me to do a really good internal search of what my values are. And so one of my top values is like my faith and connection. Those are my two top ones. And in the eating disorder, I felt constantly tortured between like serving God and serving the eating disorder. And you can never serve two things. It's impossible to have two masters, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
So that tortured me all the time. And so it went against my values, yet I loved who I was in the eating disorder. So I thought. And then with connection, eating disorders are so isolating. It got to a point with me that my friends didn't know what to do and they were so uncomfortable. And I don't want to say annoying is the right word, but like, I'm sure there were times that I was
Yeah.
annoying, but it just got too scary for them. So people would pull away.
Mm-hmm.
And so then I was left with my eating disorder, who I call Coach, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
So I was just left to hang out with Coach, and that just turned into like more behaviors. And because no one wanted to hang out with me, I just assumed like that's who I was. And yeah, it gave me this false sense of control, or like things like movement metrics is what I call them.
Mm-hmm.
They defined who I was. So if I had like a good race, I was a good person. But if I didn't perform well, I was a bad person.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. So it sounds like, just going back to like leaning into that, the uncomfortable, leaning into, which is really hard to lean into who you are and what you value, and moving in that direction, because that's scary, coming from a place like we're comfortable and used to. Um, so kind of like recapping here, there's a few things, but I love the idea, and I love the, like, your mantra of like doing things differently, because until we do things, actually do, like, take action, because I think that's another, that has to happen in your recovery too, right? You can still be making progress with consuming, and that's even an action step, consuming like recovery focused things, but you actually have to be doing something, whether it's like becoming more aware and journaling that out, which is, something that you might do differently, or or incorporating those scary foods, or what, putting a treatment team together. But you have to take action and do something different to make like movement happen. And I think that's just a great reminder for folks in recovery, because those things are uncomfortable, and I think a lot of times people want this magic, like, if I can just continue doing what I'm doing the same way I'm doing it, and still reach recovery. So kind of just recapping and summing it up, is there anything you would like viewers to know more about, that concept of doing it differently, or even something different, something you'd like to leave viewers with?
Yeah, so as a result of doing things differently, this is so exciting. There was one day that I was kind of like, F it, I don't care. And I did, and I felt like terrible, like guilt physically. I hadn't done it in a while, so I just felt, oh, like, why did I do this? Now I feel like crap. And then I started thinking, and I was like, last time when I thought I was going to do this, I actually journaled. Like,
Yeah.
people tell you to do that, but I never really done it, right? So I
Mm-hmm.
actually did it and sat through that uncomfortable emotion. And within 20 minutes, I didn't even think about. But
Mm-hmm.
this time, I just like followed through with the behavior, and I had this thought of like, man, it's actually more uncomfortable to have a behavior now.
Mm-hmm.
So it used to be comfortable to have the behavior, and then it switched on me one day, and I was like, oh my gosh, like I'm doing it. Like
Yeah.
the hope is there. Like I'm recovering.
Yeah. I think that's great. That's because, or like leaving people with that, because when you're doing things differently initially, that doesn't mean it's going to feel comfortable, and it's not going to make sense right away, and you're not going to, it's going to feel wrong. But because that is going down a path that you're not used to. So of course it is. But then you see, when you're, more clear, you're taking care of yourself more, you're doing, all the recovery things that are uncomfortable. Then when you progress in that, you can, like you said, when you go to use an eating disorder behavior, you can see that actually is something you don't want. And I think that I love when clients say that, because I think it shows such a like how strong they are in their recovery, that they are like, oh, I don't want that. And I think not wanting it shows such strength in someone's recovery. It just shows, like, I don't know, I feel like people turn the corner once they're there, of like, I genuinely see what this is, and don't want that. But you don't experience that right away when you're doing the uncomfortable thing. And it takes time and patience to get there.
And it's kind of like the idea of when the eating disorder started, it didn't start overnight.
Yeah.
It was uncomfortable. I pushed through it. It took years to develop, and recovery is the same way. It's
Yeah.
uncomfortable. So I can't expect recovery to be overnight. My eating disorder didn't happen overnight.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Yeah, definitely. I mean, showing like, I mean, one of the things, just having patience and accepting where you're at along the journey, and taking care of yourself with where you're at. Because it's, we got to get comfortable with being uncomfortable, and learn to, how can we take care of ourselves and show ourselves a ton of compassion when we're going through this, because it's gonna take time. So that's awesome. Thank you so much, Mindy. I think there's like so much here that people can take away from doing things differently, to this theme that keeps coming up in all these interviews, is being uncomfortable is okay. It's good. And it takes time, and to, you know, just have that compassion for ourselves. So thank you so much for just sharing some of your insight and part of your story. I think it's going to be much appreciated.
Yeah, you're welcome. And thanks for having me. This was fun.
Yeah, definitely. Oh, and share, I know you have a blog that you share a lot. You want to tell people about that?
Yeah, so my website is www.livinginthehotpink.com. And you can follow me on Facebook and Instagram at Living in the Hot Pink.
Mm-hmm. And Mindy just shares a lot of recovery insight and inspiration, and yeah, I think you can take away a lot from that, just as I'm sure you did today in this video. So thank you so much, Mindy.
Yeah, thank you.